Hello, I'm Steve Ridd and I'm a greenwood worker here in Mayo in the west of Ireland. I got started, probably 15 years ago or so, through beginning working in woodlands in the UK where we were living in Northumberland. And my wife and I were both working quite stressful jobs and we needed something that wasn't that on the weekends. And she's a trained agroforester. I'd done a bit of voluntary work in woodlands over the years. And so we ended up kind of by hook and crook blagging a woodland to go and lay a hedge along the edge of it from a landowner not far from where we lived. And they liked what we did and could see that we were sticking at it when they found us in -5 one day out still laying the hedge when they came walking their woods. And so we got chatting a bit more and eventually they let us have a couple of acres in their woodland that we could start coppicing, which is the traditional way of managing woodlands, whereby the ground story, the lower story rather of wood, the hazel, the rowan, is what's cut and then regrows and is used for all sorts of other things, and you leave the mature trees, the big ash and the oak behind. So we started doing that. And we did that for a few years, and I kind of wanted to learn some of the crafts that went with it. And the more I kind of looked into what made woodlands the way they are, then I kind of realised that they were hustling, bustling, lively places, really industrious places back in the day. So we started off making charcoal just in big 55-gallon steel drums, and selling that around the village, and it was selling out in like a couple of days. People really wanted it, and I thought, well, there's something to this. There's a connection that other people can kind of see with a locally made product from someone who's nearby working with natural materials. So I was chatting to the guy who was kind of the main charcoal maker in the northeast of England at the time, and he also happened to be a tool seller. He had a business selling hand carving tools. So we chatted and I found out a little bit more about spoon carving, got a couple of the basic things from him, a couple of knives and a decent axe, and just started playing with that and experimenting really. And I don't mind failing when I do stuff, and I failed plenty and I made loads of really wonky spoons. But as long as I'm learning something each time I do it, I don't mind messing up. So just made plenty of those and kept chatting with him and kept in touch. We're good friends. And he said, have you kind of considered or had a think about turning on a lathe? Of course, he had a lathe set up in his backyard, so we had a look and we had a play when I was taking a lunch break from my stressy job one day. And I bought a kit lathe from him and kind of adapted it a bit for turning bowls on, and stuck at that, and that kind of became something that drew me right in. I think the whole energy of bowl turning was something that just connected with me. I still carve plenty of spoons and I still really love it, but there's something about turning. So I've built a few more sturdy bowl lathes since then that are kind of a bit more solid and don't kick around as much for turning bowls. And that's kind of where I developed that. That was a love that just fell for me really, whether that's bowls, plates, lock and lid boxes, all sorts of things like that, is kind of where my main love is now. There's a whole load of it that just captures me, from seeing a tree on the ground somewhere to thinking, oh, I know what I could make with that. Turning, obviously, I just love that whole meditation of turning a bowl. It's completely hypnotic, absolutely captivating. I could do that all day. But I think one of those moments is when you've got the timber home, when you've turned it into something, when you've let it dry for a couple of weeks, and it kind of looks quite nice, but it's a bit plain and it's not really popped at you there. And then you oil it, and when you do that, all the grain just shoots out, and it's just suddenly, in an instant, it's just pow there, and it's that moment that you've put all of that process in, from hauling a tree out of a ditch in the middle of winter to getting it home to splitting it and turning it, and there it is in front of you. You know, a simple piece of kitchenware really, but something that's got its own history to it, and you're aware of that, and you can spread that and tell people where the things that they're using come from. I think what it is it connects me very much with land that I've worked or lived in, through a process of using my hands, of using simple hand tools, solving problems in 3 dimensions with natural materials, because each piece of wood is different, each one responds slightly differently, to make something that will be in everyday use. And that whole circle I find really satisfying, and really connecting, and it kind of regenerates me as a person in ways that other work I've done in the past perhaps hasn't. It might have been worthwhile, it might have been fulfilling in other ways, but they were quite abstract ways, and they didn't connect me to the land, it didn't connect me to history in the way that this does. There was a fabulous museum on a place called Winterlander. It's on one of the forts on the Roman wall, and they had a wood section in there, and there's a whole array of beautiful wooden items in there, but the one that kind of captured me was a simple half a sphere of wood. You could see all the axe marks, and there's a bit of a crack down one side, and it's a bowl blank. It's exactly the same bowl blank as I start out with. I've got a pile of them in the barn at the minute, and what would have happened is that someone 1700 years ago axed that out, and perhaps it got dark, perhaps they were tired and they'd turned a few bowls that day already, and they shoved it into the wood shavings under their lathe, ready for the next day, and it could have been a warm night, and they've come along the next day and it's just dried out a bit and it's cracked, and over their shoulder it's gone into the midden heap. 1700 years later, an archaeologist digs it up, and I've had exactly the same process myself, of a bowl blank, and you go through all the process with it, and it cracks, and it goes on the firewood pile. And across time, across almost 2,000 years, I feel connected to a craftsperson who was just up the road from me, using the same piece of equipment and the same woods, living in the same area, and that carries a craft and a skill through time, and I just find that such an amazing experience to connect with someone over all those years and to have the same skill. I think AI's got its place. From what I understand, it's really useful in medical diagnostics and all this kind of thing, and so it's got its place like any other tool has. In terms of arts and crafts, I can see that it's making its way in, whether that be through writing and through fine arts where it's having an inroad. But there's something just missing from that. I think with every keystroke that you take to use AI to simulate something, you're missing out from using your hands to really do those things. And yes, you might get something that kind of looks like it's real, but you didn't do it, and you learnt nothing from it, and it connected you with nothing. Whereas when you make something yourself with your hands and tools and natural materials, you are connecting in a deeply human way that takes us back millennia, we're a problem-solving, tool-using species, and that's kind of, for good and for bad, what got us where we are now. And I think you're kind of missing out on that as a human being, of something deeply satisfying within yourself if you kind of go down those routes. And it would be desperately sad to see all these old skills disappear. I know it's something really basic, isn't it? That right from childhood, kids want to, whether it's play with a bit of mud or a bit of clay or some crayons and just make a thing, draw a thing, and the sense of satisfaction they got of, look, I made this, I did that, is something that is, it sets a spark alight within you. And I'm sure we can all remember moments like that from our own childhood where we made something and we did something, whether it's a snowman or whatever, you go out and you do something real that you don't get through playing with the keyboard all the time. I've had a couple of moments on market stalls where people have picked up a bowl where I know its history and how much it's taken to make that, not only in developing the skills but just turning it. They've said, well, I could get a bowl for £1 at IKEA, why would I buy that? Well, yeah, absolutely, then go buy a bowl made from plastic from IKEA for £1 and you're away. Yeah, I mean, it can devalue crafts, but I'm aware that crafts are something that often are only available to certain people who've got the money to be able to support artists and crafters. So it's a kind of a delicate line to walk, that one. It's too easy to get snooty and say people should buy handcrafted things all the time. They're not cheap because you're paying for craftspeople's time, and that costs money. So it's difficult to say, yeah, people should always do that, but I think people should connect, even if they're not putting money into it. I understand that's not always possible, but connecting is what's important, and having a sense of what is there and what's gone into it is kind of important. If you want to get into any kind of craft, really, I'd say go do a course. There's lots of courses out and about around here where you can go and do 2 or 3 hours with someone as like a taster session, and you can just get a feel of carving or of willow work or textiles or whatever it may be. Go and do one of those little short sessions, chat to the crafter, find out who else there is doing those kind of things in the area. The first one you pick might not be for you. I've done willow work. I find it incredibly hard. I don't know how people do that all the time. I know it's not for me, but I've had a go and it was really good fun, but not mine. So if your little 2 or 3 hour session isn't for you, try a different one. Don't say, oh, that's it, I tried that, I don't want to do it. Try a different one. Just go and do a couple of courses. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't get kind of tied up in that notion that what you make has to be perfect, because I think that's a lot of what people want. You want that notion that the first thing I make has to be spot on. Well, the first thing you make isn't going to be spot on. First thing you're going to make is going to be really wonky, and so's the second, and so's the fifth. But you just go, oh no, but I'm going to persevere, I'm going to stick with this, and I'm going to make it because there's something about this is connecting with me, and I'm going to do 10, 20 of these little objects or whatever it may be that you're doing, and it will come, and your improvement will be kind of exponential to start with, and you'll really feel that difference. And as soon as you feel that, you're hooked. That's the way to do it. Once you find yourself with a craft and art that you just go, this one's mine.